Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the artist behind Friday at Panel Syndicate. It's Marcos Martin. Thanks for coming on, Marcos.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So we're here mostly to talk about Friday, your new series with Ed Brubaker and Musa Vicente. And the first issue is out. It was your surprise release, surprise announcement book. I loved it. For listeners that don't know, I'm going to do a quick spiel about, what it is. So I'm going to read the solicit. Friday Fitzhugh spent her childhood solving crimes and digging up occult secrets with her best friend Lancelot Jones, the smartest boy in the world. But that was the past. Now she's in college, starting a new life on her own. Except when Friday comes back for the holidays, she's immediately pulled back into Lance's orbit and finds that something very strange and dangerous is happening in their little New England town. This is literally the Christmas vacation from hell, and neither of them may survive to see the new year. So your podcast is going to go up 2 weeks after I had Ed on the show. And I heard the origins of Friday from his side. I've heard, you reached out to him, you wanted to work with him, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start there. Why you'd worked with Ed on a Captain America annual, one project. It wasn't even like the full issue. I think he split it with Javier Pulido, according to him.
Yes, that's true.
Why did you want to work with Ed? Why did you send that email, I guess?
Well, it had been a while since I'd finished Barrier, and I knew when I finished that I wanted to take some time off for a while, and that I did actually, because it took me more than a year, I think, to start thinking about getting into comic books again. I'd been doing covers basically for Marvel, and So I started to think, about the possibility of going back and tackling new projects, and so one of the it's really hard for an artist, in my case, since it takes me so long to work in a project, actually from the beginning to end. It's a big concern to find the right person to work with, I guess.
Right.
You could say. So not only professionally, in terms of someone that is good, but also someone that you're going to be able to work with personally. That you're going to have a good relationship, and because I like. Talking a lot about the project, and I like sending emails back and forth, and I like discussing what we're going to do, and you never know who you're going to be working with. If there's some writers that don't enjoy that just prefer to just do their thing and then get the pages and that's it, and so there's a certain level of intimacy, I guess, that I. From the writer that I had with Brian, because we'd been friends for a long time, so that was something that was guaranteed when I was working with Brian. And in this case, since I was going to work with someone new, I started to think about the writers basically that I knew personally, and one of them was Ed. Basically, because we'd worked before, and I've met him personally, and so obviously I love his work, and I thought it would be at least nice to try and see if he was interested at all. I had also contacted Warren Ellis, and at one point, my idea was to work in 2 series at the same time.
Oh my God.
I guess it's been so long since I've done a comic book that suddenly in my mind, I thought of myself as someone that, I've reached that point where I can manage to, tackle or juggle 2 projects at the same time. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, Warren, when after Ed agreed to work together with me, Warren said, you know what, just go ahead and do this with Ed, and we can discuss working again, sometime in the future. So he was way more sensible than I was, because that my initial idea was to juggle two projects at the same time. And so yeah, basically that was it. I loved Ed's work, and very important, I think the most important thing, I had his email.
I'm very glad that Warren saved you from yourself, because I have to say I'm not surprised, just based off of our previous conversations, that you would have asked both of them and thought that could happen. But I mean, that's the thing with those Panel Syndicate books. You draw them, you also letter them, right?
Yeah.
And then you're also like, for Friday, you both did, you translated it to Spanish at the same time and lettered it in Spanish too. And so, and then also like the Panel Syndicate in a lot of ways is you. And so, I mean, I'm trying to imagine adding another book to that. Although, of course, you didn't know a pandemic was coming. That would have definitely added, you would be in dire straits right now. But
I'm feeling dizzy right now just thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
What might have happened. So
yeah, I think that's. So, are you familiar with the idea of Sadie Hawkins dances? They're so like they might be an American only custom, but basically it's like a high school dance where girls ask the guys to the dance instead of vice versa, and so you kind of flip it. And I do think it's interesting because typically when I interview people, a lot of times it's the writer asking the artist, or the writer working with a publisher, and then the publisher, kind of either bringing on the artist or like assigning an artist. But you kind of you Sadie Hawkins this. You were the person who was the artist asking the writer for the project, and I really love that. I think that's fantastic. But I do have to ask in relation to that, did you have to talk to Brian first to see if he was okay with you seeing other people?
Well, I knew Brian wasn't not going to be doing any comic book projects for a while, so we had talked about it,
right?
And yes, I guess he gave me his blessing. I was able to ask other people out.
That's great. Well, so you had worked with Ed before, but only briefly, and you knew that you liked him, and you had his email, which was obviously crucial.
Yes.
What appealed to you about working with Ed? Is Ed's style of writing something that you thought would jive well with the types of stories you like to tell?
I knew the only thing I knew was that I love his style. I love the stories that he tells, and his characters, his characterization. And I really like the way he writes. And I've said this in the interviews that I've done. And I wonder what Ed thinks about my description of his work. But what I say is that there's like this kind of sober sadness. That's what I say on all his dialogue and all his writing that just seems to permeate. Shines through everything that he does. And I like that. I guess I say sober sadness. I guess it could be like a melancholic feel to it, even if, there's something to it that to me just feels, this kind of sadness that I find appealing.
Sure.
So yeah, I thought that it would be cool to do something, in that style. I had no idea of when I contacted him, I didn't know what kind of story he would be coming up with.
Sure. I mean, were you surprised when he was like, "Oh, what about a teen detective story?"
I think I was surprised. I think the thing that surprised me the most was the fact that it was exactly what I was looking for.
Without even knowing it?
Without even knowing, because I didn't suggest anything, because I don't like, my perspective is when I'm working with someone, with a writer, what I want is the writer to tell the story that he wants to tell, that he feels comfortable or feels like doing at the time. I don't like coming in and saying, I want to do like a Western, or I'd rather have the writer be enjoying himself, telling a story that he really wants to tell. And because that way I know that if I feel that enjoyment, I will enjoy it too.
Mm-hmm.
I will be able to do my best work rather than, shoehorning the writer into some kind of style or genre that I feel like doing.
Yeah.
So I prefer to be the one to adapt to the writer rather than the other way around.
So if Ed, and I actually agree, I think sober sadness is a good description of Ed's writing. That's not to say that he's not capable of other things, but you read Friday and there's a lot of like very Ed feeling stuff in there. Like Friday herself, Friday Fitzhugh, an amazing character, but at the same time she says very little, but she says a whole lot in her head. And I feel like that's a very Ed type of thing. But so if he's sober sadness, what would you say your natural energy is? Because I typically think of you as a little bit more lively, and maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that's just because the projects I've read you on.
How would I describe myself?
Yeah. I've never asked an artist that. I'm very interested to see what you say.
I would say desperate. Desperation would be the adjective that I would use with myself.
Desperation to finish the project?
Yes, desperation to work through this, whatever. It's like, Jesus. My feeling is always like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. And then it's like, okay, let's see. Let's try not to disappoint anyone.
Oh my God. That's the funny thing is like, I think as fans or as readers, as outsiders to all of this, we always have our own like headcanon. I bet if you told Ed that, like the sober sadness thing, he'd be like, what the hell?
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I think that's with every comic creator. I think everyone has these ideas. Like I remember I was interviewing Stuart Immonen once, and I used a word that I thought was fitting for him, and he was like, I don't know if I would use that word. And I was like, damn it, I've horribly failed at this. But I mean, that's the thing though, is like, I think a lot of times it's hard to have distance enough from your own work to be able to speak to like ideas like that. It's like you can say that Ed has sober sadness in his writing, but he'd just be like, I don't know, I just write about stories I like.
Yeah. No. I that's why I said I'm curious to see what he thinks about that, because he's probably like, what is he talking about? What does that mean? But and yes, about my style, I think it's better to leave other people, to define it. Yeah, I guess, because it also depends on each person.
Yeah, totally.
If you hate my work, you're gonna say it's basically rubbish. That's the way to describe it. And if you like it, I'm sure you will find whatever it is in there that you like the most, I guess, or that attracts you the most.
Sure. Well, I did want to talk about, you had mentioned that you really liked working with people who, it's not just they're going to send you a script and you work on it and it's the whole assembly line thing. You wanted to have conversation. And if you look at like, the back of, God, what was that one issue you and Brian did of Private Eye that was kind of like a director's cut where you guys talked about how you made it. You had the whole thing that showed your emails and the process and everything like that. So it's really clear that when you say that you like to interact with people when you're working on a project, you are not kidding. So how did, you're working with Ed, you're getting into the flow. How did the title develop once you and Ed started going back and forth? Was there a lot of back and forth with Friday?
Yes, there were a lot of emails. But also Ed I think he had a very clear idea in his mind of what he wanted. It's not, everything was, to me, now, the way I remember it is it was pretty fleshed out really fast.
Yeah.
At the beginning. I mean, it took a while for him to get me the first script. It took a while. I mean, for me, it was like really fast, but it probably took like a like a couple of months or 3 months to get the first script. But everything that we talked about in the first week, I'd say it was pretty much what it became.
Wow.
It wasn't. I mean, it was. I remember, for example, that my idea for the character for Friday was really different at the beginning. So when I started sketching, I was going in a very different direction.
Different direction than he wanted to go in?
Different direction than what I ended up going.
Oh, okay.
Basically, because my idea was something different from the moment I got Ed's character description, like when he wrote it down, and he just like a couple of pages with the characters and the town, and once I read that, I was like, oh, okay. So this is different from what I was imagining, and then I went into the direction that I finally went with. But at the beginning, Friday was like real different. It was like skinny and had this. She had dark hair and this 60s haircut, typical. What do you call it? Bobby.
Oh yeah, sure.
So it was a different character. It was a different character. And then when I read a little bit more about it, about her, that's when I really think I got the gist of the character and what Ed was going for. So yeah, it was. But basically, I think the whole concept of the series was pretty much set. I think Ed had a very clear idea of where he wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, I do think one of the interesting things about Friday is, you have Lancelot Jones, this small detective kid, and then you have Friday, who when I first heard the premise of the story, I heard it was a teen detective story starring a character named Friday. I was expecting Friday to be more of like this, like the I don't know, Sherlock Holmes type, but she was really like, she's the heavy, like she's the one who has the ice balls that she chucks at people's heads and like is known for her swift right cross and things like that. So how does knowing that she's going to be the more, I guess when it comes to the character design for both of them, one is going to be more of like the obsessive mystery solver, and the other one is going to be kind of the heavy type, the one who's going to be beating people up if it's necessary, amongst other things. How does that inform the way you design these characters?
Well, with Friday it was tricky because I had the feeling that she was like the muscle of the team, right?
Right.
But at the same time, she's a girl, and when the story begins, she's not really that anymore. She's grown out of that. She's in college. She's coming back. So when you meet her, you're not meeting her in that role exactly. So I was trying to make her, I guess, feminine in a way. Say that. But at the same time, that you can imagine her, really being the muscle of the team. I don't know. It's hard. It's because it's not. I mean, she's the muscle, but she's not only that.
Right.
She. It's not like she's stupid or anything. She's not. It's not like the typical, the strong man of the group, who's maybe a little bit dumber, and the other one is the brainy. It doesn't really fall into those
clean categories.
Yeah. So I guess it was a bit hard to find the balance between all those different things. That's why I was really happy with the way she came out. Lancelot was much harder. Lancelot was really, really hard because the idea I had at the beginning was also different for him. Then it changed. Then it seemed when I first read it, I was like, oh, I got him. I know exactly what he's going to look like. And then when I sat down to draw him, I just couldn't get him right, because he has to have this kind of sort of nerdiness quality to him, but also he has to look smart, somehow attractive too, because there seems to be something going on between them. So there's maybe, have that romantic possibility, there too. So I don't know, there was different things, and also the fact that everything that I came up with seemed to be, he seemed to look a little bit too much like Harry Potter. The moment I had glasses on, he was Harry Potter. The moment, and if he didn't, he was the young Sherlock Holmes. And also, I want him to bring about memories or the feeling of Stranger Things either. He looks a little bit like the main character, Mike.
Yeah.
So it was a hard balance to. I don't know. It was. I still don't know if I got him exactly right, but I think in the end, more or less worked out. I think I got rid of the glasses. That's for sure.
Yeah. No more Harry Potter.
Point, I was like, no, she's the one wearing glasses, and he's just not wearing glasses. Let's forget about that.
Well, I think one thing I really like about your art is how your character acting is always great, in the sense that I feel like the way that people stand and the way that people move and the what they do when they're, being them, kind of, it says a lot about who they are. Like, even just the cover image, you look at, Friday, and she's, totally upright, just standing confident. She knows what she's doing. She's like the physical person. And Lancelot's got like a light slouch to him.
Yeah.
And I feel like those little things, like, they kind of say something about these characters. I also, one thing I really like too, and maybe this is one of those magic of comics. I don't really know, like, whether or not it was in the script or it was something you did, but I love when, what is it, Sheriff Bixby? Yeah, Sheriff Bixby and Lancelot go to pick her up, Friday, up at the train station, and he's got his map, and like, he's like, oh, we're on the case, get in the car, and he just, instead of like doing anything, he's just looking completely forward at this map, and like that, you look at that, and it does two things. It can say that maybe he's ignoring what's going on with him and Friday, or two, it can just say that this kid is like obsessed. He is obsessed with solving crimes, and so he's like, he says, get in the car, and then he gets right back on the business. And I thought, I really like those things. And like, that's one of the things I really like about a lot of the projects that you work on, but also with Ed, because Ed was, he was on the podcast and he was talking about how you were kind of, figuring out things on the page and getting room to figure things out. So it's like, there's a seamlessness to it. It's like, it's hard to say where Ed stops and you begin, if that makes sense.
Well, that's a great compliment for me, because it means that's comic books.
Yeah.
Read. It's the same thing that a lot of people say this about reviews, but where they separate story and art, and they really shouldn't. I mean, people keep doing it, but it's not something that you can dissociate from each other. I mean, the script is there, but what you're only reading the script that I've drawn. You're not reading Ed's script. You're reading Ed's script through my eyes, if that makes sense.
Totally.
It's my interpretation of Ed's script. So everything there is a combination of two people. So yeah, I like that. I like that you don't know where someone ends and the other one begins, because it's really, that's the ideal, I guess. There's the thing about Ed's script that I wanted to communicate in the comic was that sadness that we were talking about, the kind of melancholy that exudes through the whole story. I think because she is back from college. She's and then there's this kind of sadness of her going back to a place where she really doesn't belong anymore. And to me, that's like the central piece of the story. Uh, and Lance's character, the way I've always read him, he's also kind of he's sad. He's like that's why I drew his eyes. His eyes kind of like droop, droopy eyes,
Mm-hmm.
They have this slight inclination to make him always kind of sad, even if he's smiling.
Yeah.
So because that's the way I imagine. That's also why he's always kind of thinking, or or doubting, or he's not this really. Even though he's got self-confidence, I picture him kind of always doubting about things, because he's always looking for clues, or looking for stuff that so yeah, his relationship with Friday is one, especially at this point, is one where he's more focused in his work, in his investigations, than in any kind of in his relationship with her. So that's when they meet, he's not looking at her.
Right.
And I think that was in the Ed script, that he would be looking at his map. And something that I tried to do during the whole comic was that to never have them look at each other. You, as the reader, you don't have a panel where both of them are talking directly, into each other's eyes. If one of them is looking at the other one is not looking at the.
Yeah, there's always that awkwardness
or
there.
looking at the camera, or so, but you never actually see them looking and talking to each other, which I think it's a way to reinforce that feeling that they're there, but they're not really connecting. There's something that's not right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's this one line in there, and I think it's funny that I've brought you on to compliment Ed's script, but it's gonna happen. I'm sorry. There's that one line that's in there where it's like Friday narrates and says it's like holding hands with someone you broke up with, and I feel like that's kind of like the pervasive vibe. It's like there's always, even though they're on this like adventure that was fun in theory, but it ends up not being very fun because Weasel is not in a good place.
Yeah.
There's like a pervasive feeling of sadness to it. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that's, tying back into what we were saying, like what you were saying about the combination of story and art and everything like that. That's I had somebody on recently who was writing and drawing their own series. And I think part of the reason why a lot of people who write comic reviews have a hard time talking about art is because they don't think of art as story, and also in some weird ways they don't really think of writing as like part of the art. There's like a blurriness between all of it, because like some of the writing guides some of the art, and some of the art more forms the story. Actually, all of the art forms the story. And so I think that's where that trickiness lies, because it's like if you could like look at this and be like, there's no way you could look at Friday and be like, this is Ed's part and this is Marcos's part. That's just impossible. You can say what Moonce's is though, the colors, but
yeah.
I will say though, that's one thing I'm interested in is obviously going from working with Brian to Ed. It's like slightly different creatures. I mean, I wouldn't, it's not like completely reinventing the wheel, but at the same time, did you find, just your household in general, was there a learning curve to working with Ed at all, or like in how you wanted to approach the story? Because I know that in the back of the issue, Ed said that he told you that this book feels like Lovecraft's New England is colliding with Edward Gorey's, and when you were working to define King's Hill and this whole world, how much, I mean, like what goes into that? Because it seems like it's a very fully realized world.
Yes, I wouldn't say fully realized, because we're just starting right now. I'm in the middle of another scene that's like it's So there's a lot of reference. Let's just leave it at that.
I was gonna say, yeah, it seemed like there'd have to be.
Yes, yes. It's. I mean, working with going back to Brian and Ed, they're obviously very different. The good thing that the similarities between them is that they're both great. So basically, and that's one of the things that I knew going in. One of the reasons why I asked Ed to work together was that I knew that was like guaranteed, and which means basically that you can take a script by either Ed or Brian. You can basically draw what they say, and you're gonna have a fine comic book. I mean, it's gonna be a good comic book. So my work is to turn that into, something as good, even better, I guess, or to optimize it in as much a way as I can. Part of that is, for a very important part in this project was the mood, the atmosphere, the location. What he mentioned about Lovecraft meeting, a New England town and Edward Gorey, that's fundamental, I think, also to the way you read the story. If you don't have that, if I don't put the work in that, then you're gonna be missing something. You're gonna be missing something from the story. You're not gonna read it the same way. So it's really important. It was really important, at least to me, to go in there and look at as much reference material as possible and try to put in as much work into that as possible. In small details. Also, something that was very interesting to me was the combination of both that kind of Lovecraftian thing that you associate more with the beginning of the 20th century, I guess. But mix it up with the 70s. That was something that when Ed told me his idea, I think that was one of the things that attracted me the most visually. The fact that I would be able to bring both of those, that combination of worlds together, I thought it would be like really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Because just, having a gritty 70s story in Manhattan, it's interesting, but I feel like I've seen a lot of that already. And telling a story in a New England town in the early 1900s is also exciting, but I've also feel like I've seen a lot of that too.
Mm-hmm.
But both of them together, maybe not so much, I felt. So I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
That idea of having, that the old buildings, but then the cars from the 70s or the stores from the 70s or the movie cinemas from the 70s, and have the people with their 70s clothes. That all seemed like very fun to do, fun to try. And I don't think, I like that you say that it's like fully realized, because I don't feel most of the story happens in the forest. So you really I don't think you get much of a sense of that, but I try to put as much as possible in like the couple of pages that happen in the town, or so maybe I did my work well. Did it shine through?
I mean, you did okay. You did okay. Let's not give you too much credit. I mean, come on. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. I want to take a quick second to talk about my friends at Big Bang Comics. They're Dublin's finest comic shop, and they're home to one of the best graphic novel collections you can find in the world, as well as exciting exclusive covers for some of your favorite titles. Not in Ireland? No problem. They're mail order pros. As I know from experience, they've mailed me a bunch of stuff, great stuff, and they can get you set up with everything you're looking for. All you have to do is order online via their Comic Hub account. You can find them on Twitter at @thebigbang_, on Instagram at Big Bang Comics, where you can find them doing Instagram Live with creators, which is a whole lot of fun, and on their Comic Hub account, where you can order all the latest and greatest in comics and beyond, including the one place you can get Declan Shalvey and Gavin Fulton's new graphic novel, Bog Bodies, right now. Check them out online and order some comics today. And now, back to the show. I will say, that's one of the funny things. You're saying the 70s. I don't think at any point in the issue do you guys actually state that it's taking place in the 70s. But I just knew because of, I don't know, I told this to Ed, and I know you listened to it, so it's like, you know what I was talking about. But seeing Christopher Lee on the marquee, and then seeing the ambulance that Friday is sitting across from as she smokes, there's just like, you see those, and they're like these perfect evocative landmarks of a time that is not the current one and is very specifically 70s. It's just like there's a look. I also like, you're talking about the era specific thing. I feel like if you made this in the 80s, it would have easily felt like a lot of different things. But because it's in the 70s, there's a difference there. Like the 80s is, the 80s plus like monsters. I mean, I'm not going to presume where this is going to go, but the Lovecraftian stuff brings up a certain idea. And I feel like we've seen that in the 80s. You mentioned Stranger Things. There's that. But the 70s, that has a different feel to it. And I like that that's the direction that you all went with this.
I think it works well. It's not that it's never been done. I mean,
sure.
When I first read about it, I thought about the Doctor Strange stories that happened, I think, in the really early 70s. That were also set like in Maine and had like this Lovecraftian cult and stuff. So that's what where my mind went the first time I read about it. I think the combination works really well. And I'm glad that you could pick up that it was the 70s, because at one point I was slightly concerned that that wouldn't be as obvious as, and also I didn't want to go over the top.
Sure.
Because I wanted to look like the 70s, but also during this, it's like the early 70s. So you're gonna find stuff from the 60s, and because people in the 70s, it's not like they all went, they were all dressed like, Saturday Night Fever. It's like a small town in Maine, and so I guess the fashion there would also be different at the time. So I tried not to go too much, over the top, and just keep it subtle, but try and pick things that clues for the reader to set the time, I guess. And one of those was the ambulance, the car, and the Christopher Lee thing, some of the clothes, but again, I wasn't sure there were enough clues, to the point where I added one poster of Nixon's re-election in the page where she's walking down the street. There's one panel there where she walks in front of a store, a TV store, where there's like the old TV sets, and on the wall there was a poster of Nixon, like Nixon being reelected, and on top of that poster was like a peace sign. So I thought that's gonna give a 70s vibe to it, and it's gonna. But also I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was a little bit too much. And so I asked Ed, and Ed was like, "Yeah, I think it's too much. The Nixon thing was a little bit too much, so we just got rid of it. We left the peace sign there, but that was it."
It was Lancelot's wallpaper that really got me. It was good wallpaper.
Yeah, that's right. Once I really like that kitchen too.
Yeah, it was a good one. I like that panel is just really nice in general. I like what he's wearing. I like that it really clearly displays it's fall. It's good classic wallpaper, and it's just like, I don't know, very good mannerisms for Lancelot. But one last thing with this that I wanted to talk about was we're talking about how you and Ed work together and everything like that. And I had talked with Ed about how I wasn't used to him having double page spreads in his comics. It's just not something he really does, like with at least with Sean. And I thought that was really interesting. And he was saying that you actually kind of worked it together to be a double page spread. So I wanted to actually ask about that, but also the final page, because I love the final page. It is just an owl sitting up on a tree with end of chapter 1. It's a beautiful, beautiful page. But for some, they might get to that and be like, huh? Why was, if I remember correctly, Ed said something along the lines of like, that was a decision by you. Why was that the right thing to do with the end of the issue?
Yes. Because that was the last panel of the previous page.
Oh, so okay.
The owl did exist in the script, and Ed just finished the story, just ended it in that panel as part of the page and of the previous page. But when I read it, there's a part to my working process that's intuitive. Like, I've got friends that are much more rational than I am, and I am rational to a certain extent. But there are times when I'm like, it's just like my guts tell me that it's not really working. It's that I like the panel, but at the end, at the bottom of the page there, it didn't work the way, in a way I liked. It seemed a little bit old-fashioned. It wasn't, again, it worked. I mean, it wasn't bad, and had I done it, and it was good too. I mean, it wasn't, but I felt like if I gave that a whole page, it had a different meaning, and it ended the story in a slightly different beat, and it was something that was more interesting to me. Because you've been through this trip with Friday, through this whole, which has really been a spiritual, I guess, trip, besides being, a physical trip for her. And by the end of it, there's something wrong,
right?
Something's off, and you just need some kind of closure that's not really a closure, slightly unsettling, something that's just kind of mysterious. That's the owl and the...
I love it. I mean, there's something really ominous about it.
It's the owl looking at Friday. It's just an owl there.
Yeah.
I really don't know, but it's kind of like, kind of unsettling. It's there, and it's also, I think, it's evocative, and it has to do with the mood and the nature of the story. So I think it was a good visual to end the issue there.
I loved it. I mean, it like you were saying, the unsettling part, there's something really ominous about it, but it's weird because it was like, at first I was like, oh my God. And then I started smiling just because I was like, this is such a cool decision. I like this. This is good.
Good.
Well, I want to actually ask about, this is something I talked to Ed about, which is the length of the issue and how he was interested in kind of varying the lengths because, it's digital, it's Panel Syndicate, you can kind of do what you want. But he said that you advocated for keeping it kind of more fairly steady, normal sized-ish comic lengths. Why was that? Is that something that's a product of how you can do your best work? Is it a product of what you've learned while doing Panel Syndicate and also running other comics that are through Panel Syndicate, or what is that?
I don't think I heard that, but I don't think I ever told Ed that it had to be a specific, like a comic book, because that's precisely one of the advantages of Panel Syndicate.
Right.
I like the fact that we don't have a number of pages. I think what I did suggest was that it shouldn't be too short. That is something that I do advise anyone who works with us, that to keep it, at least like 15 pages. It has to do also with our model, with our payment model, because it's already hard enough to get people to pay for a digital comic that you can, download for free. If you're only given like 10 pages of content, I know that as a user or as a reader, it would be hard for me to pay anything for that. So I like that there's like enough content there. So, as I would say that, yeah, somewhere around 15 pages would be like the minimum. But other than that, I like the writer to, do whatever they feel comfortable with.
Sure.
So, and the problem is that usually the writers feel more comfortable adding pages, which means it's going to take me much longer to finish the issue. So yeah, I think at the beginning Ed was like, the first issue went a little bit longer than a regular issue, so we went up to 27 pages maybe. I think it was 24 in the original script, but I always end up adding pages, and so it ended up in 26, 27, something like that. And so Ed was like, don't worry, because the next chapter is going to be short. It's going to be like 16, 17 pages. I was like, well, okay, it's a little bit short, but. And so then when he sent me the script, it was 38 pages. So thanks a lot, Ed. But yeah, I'm fine. I mean, what I really want is for the story to be as good as it can be, or as good as the writer thinks. And if it needs more pages, so be it. I mean, that's one of the good things about Panel Syndicate. We don't need to worry about that. And I actually, when we got the script, we cut down the script. I think in 2 pages. We talked about it, and there was a scene that I thought that maybe we could shorten. And so it ended up being 2 pages shorter, but I'm just I'm working on the layouts now, and I just added 2 more pages, so we're back.
There we go. So is the idea with, like, let's say somebody released a 12-page comic, is part of the fear that somebody would pay money and then feel like it wasn't worth it, and then they wouldn't pay in the future?
No, not so much. Not so much that, but rather that just if you go to the page, and because we tell you how many pages the comic book has.
Sure.
If it's a 12-page comic book, you're gonna go like, 12 pages are like. I think it's a psychological thing.
Totally.
It's just. Would you pay for 12 pages? I don't know.
I would, but I'm weird. So I don't know if I'm normal. I mean, it's like some of my favorite comics are just like random, like Instagram or Twitter comics. And I'm just like, oh, cool. It was like 4 total like images. I'm like, this was great. I enjoyed that.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, and now that you mentioned that, I'm following Ben Mara's comic in Instagram. It's great. It's like 4 every day, and I love them. But with our model, where we're inviting the reader to pay whatever they want, I don't know. I feel like there should be like a minimum. That it's not really. It doesn't work. It's not like an Instagram thing where you're putting up panels. It's not a web comic. It's really a comic book. It's really a normal comic book, just in digital form, in a PDF, basically. So I think what the reader is expecting is, like something as close to a comic book as possible.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking always about at least the minimum amount of pages. I also say that the fact that the comic book has 60 pages, for example, also doesn't affect what the reader pays the reader's not going to pay more.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, so if I make 60 pages, I'm going to get like $10 for, no. I mean, readers are pretty much going to pay the same.
Do you find that most kind of pay normal comic prices? They're like, oh, $3.99.
Some do, but no. The average payment is somewhere between $2.50 and $3. But it depends. I mean, there's a lot of people pay like $10.
Mm-hmm. Damn,
so,
I paid $5. I got to work on my contribution.
A lot of people pay $5. $5 is also a usual thing, but a lot of people pay $1. So it evens out more or less around $2.50, $3.
Sure.
So that's pretty good. But again, our intent is to make it as accessible and affordable as possible to anyone.
So you said that this it is a comic book. That's what you're creating. But you're now 7 years into Panel Syndicate being a thing. Does building a comic on Panel Syndicate feel demonstrably different than your experiences on other books, or is it because it is in fact a comic book? Does it feel much the same? How does it feel now that you're a little way or quite a ways into it?
I told this to Ed the day we put out Friday, as like, you never know what's going to happen. If you're going to get a lot of downloads or not. But the thing that always amazes me when I put something out in Panel Syndicate is like, we just created a comic book.
Yeah.
we just did it. And we put it out, and people can read it exactly, in the digital form, but it's the same experience as reading a comic book that you would put out with a regular publisher. And it's it's basically the same. When we did the Private Eye with Image, the files it was pretty much the same thing. I mean, it was the same thing that we'd done with Panel Syndicate. There was no extra work. So what you read, the digital form and the print form, was basically the same thing. So to me, it's amazing that we get to create an actual comic book from scratch and put it out. And so the experience is to me, the experience is the same as working for Marvel, let's say, with the exception that there's more amount of work in the sense that I'm doing my own lettering.
Yeah.
and putting the thing together as a PDF. Maybe it's but that's it. And it's very, very rewarding.
Right. But you also, I mean, that one difference too is you kind of get to follow your own schedule. I mean, you obviously want to release on a certain frequency, but at the same time, you get to define your own schedule in a way that you wouldn't be able to with other publishers, I imagine. And obviously that's probably important when, let's say, a pandemic happens and maybe other things come up and you need to like shift your schedule because I don't know, you have childcare and you have other things to deal with, and maybe you just don't feel like working. I imagine in a time like this, having flexibility is pretty nice.
Yes, no, absolutely, and it's one of the biggest advantages of Panel Syndicate, and it's one of the main reasons why I thought of Panel Syndicate in the first place, was the fact that I would be able to spend the amount of time that I would need working on a comic book, something that I couldn't do it obviously at Marvel or DC, because there's a schedule and there's stuff that you have to be aware of. But,
right.
But yeah, it's one of the nicest things of Panel Syndicate, and one of the things that makes it the hardest when I ever think about doing stuff for Marvel or DC again. It's just when I finished Barrier, I thought for a moment, it's like, well, should I go back and try working at Marvel or DC? And I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure I can go back to this regular schedule and and knowing the amount of pages, for example. Like, those two things, the page count and the schedule,
Mm-hmm.
they might seem silly, but once you get used to not worrying about those, it's really hard to go back to that.
Yeah, I imagine. Well, and actually, I do think I had written down that you had done a lot more cover work, and like after you left, or after Barrier finished, it seemed like for like a solid like 2 years, you were doing a lot of covers, a lot more than usual. And I love your covers, and I think that's fantastic. Like, I was a big fan of the Meet the Scrolls series that Robbie Thompson and Nico Henrikon did, and you did all the covers for that. And it was really interesting to see that. Was that mostly just you had like you knew you wanted that break, but you also knew you didn't want to commit to doing like 6 or 12 issues on some random Marvel or DC or whomever book? And you just wanted to like make sure you were still kind of having money come in during that, or was it partially you're like, covers are a good opportunity, it's a good way to get myself out there? What was it that made you want to do that?
Well, when I finished Barrier, I was basically exhausted with the sequential work, basically. So I knew that I didn't want to go back to drawing comics for a while.
Right.
That I knew. And so, but I obviously I need money because for some reason my kids like to eat.
Oh,
And I still haven't been able to figure that out.
yeah,
So
it's tough.
So the cover work, I really like doing covers, and it's because it's a different type of work. It requires a different type of approach. The brain works in a different way than when you're doing a comic book. And I was really, when I finished Barrier, I really, really felt like, doing covers for a while because it excited me. And so that's the reason why I was lucky enough that that they would offer me work, which is something I wasn't sure of at the time. But fortunately, I was able to get work as a cover artist. And that's what I've been doing, basically for 2 solid years, yes. Except for an issue of the Amazing Spider-Man that I did for Dan Slott's last issue, which was also great to be able to contribute to that. And but other than that, basically everything else has been covers.
Yeah, well, and you did, I think, one story in Marvel Comics 1000 too. But I mean, I will say, and I don't want to give you a big head or anything, but you are very good at covers.
Thank you.
You are very good at it, and so it was really exciting to see. You made it really easy on me. I do this like Friday column every week where I look at 10 things I liked or I didn't like from the previous week in comics. And every time a new cover would come out, I'm like, 1 of 10 is figured out. I'm just going to write about how Marcos Martinez is really good at covers again. This is easy.
Great. Well,
yeah.
Now you got to pay me.
What? I didn't know that's how this works. I made a huge mistake. So just a couple more questions. I want to just finish with some broader Panel Syndicate stuff. I want to ask, this is going to seem stupid, maybe, but are you Panel Syndicate? Like, is it you? Do you own it?
Are you asking like for my secret identity?
Basically, yeah, I guess.
Am I Panel Syndicate? I'm part of Panel Syndicate.
I guess does somebody own it? Like, is it just, or is it just kind of like a decentralized, like, collective of comics?
Yeah, no, I think, that I should clarify. It is not a company. Nobody owns Panel Syndicate. It's nothing really. Panel Syndicate is just a site. It's just a website. It's just a domain name.
But it sounds so cool, though. It really makes you guys sound like this weird comic book crime syndicate, which I think is really badass.
Well, that was the idea behind it. The fact that also every other name was taken.
Yeah, that's the tough part.
But Panel Syndicate is not a company. Is more just a collective of creators. That it's the platform for creators to put out their stuff, to put it up and offer it to the readers. So each creator owns their comic books, And to the question, am I Panel Syndicate? I do take care of all the website costs. That I do. So I am in charge of that. And I am mostly in charge of the social media. That is the reason why we suck at it. But so yeah, but Panel Syndicate is, if you ask me, Panel Syndicate is really my friend. Who's the technician, the computer technician that's in charge of putting everything up. If we don't have him, there's no Panel Syndicate.
So he's Panel Syndicate.
I don't have a clue of how to put that shit up. He is the real Panel Syndicate.
Yeah, well, maybe I should interview him next. He's gonna be next on my list.
I always tell him that he's not someone that likes to go, on the outside. He just he likes to be in the shadows.
There we go. Well, that fits Panel Syndicate in its whole crime-sounding nature. But
right.
So, related to that though, how do you decide who comes on? Because last time we talked, it was right after Barrier started. It was before The Walking Dead, The Alien came out. None of Universe wasn't out. None of the
Universe was out.
What's that? Was Universe out?
Universe was out. Universe came out just before the end of The Private Eye.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Universe was out. You were starting to bring some people on. How do you? I imagine there's people. I mean, especially now, I have to imagine that there's maybe more interest in publishing through Panel Syndicate when comics are shut down. How do you decide who is a good fit for your collective?
Well, it's basically it boils down to the fact that I am the one that has to take care of everything that's around that, except for the technical part. And so there's a limit to the amount of projects that I can tackle. And something that I really make an effort with every project. I want to make sure that it's going to be in some way profitable for the creator. So sometimes I know that sometimes I'm sure that I have people that have approached me, and I know they're not going to make any money, and I know this is just not going to be worth their time, and so that's what I tell them basically. It's like we're not the place,
right?
Some other times, I also, whenever any author contact me, I always make sure that they understand the risks of, doing it through us, of putting out a comic book through us, because I never know what's going to happen. I really don't. I can guess based on this 7 years of experience, but there's no way I can tell an author, you're going to do fine. For example, you're going to do this amount of money, or so. If they're worried about money, then I tend to discourage them to come with us, basically, because it's a good way of being disappointed. So what I try to make sure of is that they are basically happy with what we are, with our approach to comics, with our approach to the relationship between readers and creators. And usually if they're fine with that, I think they are going to find the experience rewarding. And that's basically, that's the way I go whenever I'm approached with new projects. As I look at them, I talk to the authors, the creators. I let them know what the odds are of them making money or exposure, and I let them know also about the advantages of the fact that they're going to own everything, that the fact that they can take it down whenever they want. It's not like we have any kind of rights. But it's basically that we're not a company, that we're just a platform. It's like where we display the comics. So, it's your comic, you can do whatever you want with it. So there's advantages to publishing through us, but there are lots of risks, and I want to make sure that if you come with us, you're aware of those risks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a very good seller. I'm not a good salesman at all. So usually my replies are a little bit of Debbie Downers to most creators, I guess.
Maybe that's why you and Ed get along so well. You guys both have that somber sadness. But I mean, it's like it makes sense. I mean, you want people to be realistic about what they're getting into. So that makes sense. But the last thing I want to talk about is something related to what you were saying, where it's like, I think one thing that's really interesting about what you've done so far on Panel Syndicate, with Brian, but also beyond now, is you had Private Eye, which I feel like Private Eye on its surface is the most obviously commercial idea, if you will, from the lot. I mean, that was one of the funny things. I mean, funny, I'm doing air quotes, funny things about the beginning of the pandemic was when people started talking about, like, this is like in Private Eye where people have to wear masks and we're going to start having like all these different, glamours on and stuff like that. And it was something that could like get into like the collective unconscious. And then you have Barrier, which I think is a great comic, but also a particularly challenging one because half of it's in English and the other half's in Spanish. And it turns out Americans are not very bilingual. And so that's an interesting challenge. And then you had The Walking Dead, The Alien, which is a very unique one-off project, but at the same time, having a Walking Dead comic on your platform is a great way to get a lot of eyes over there. And then lastly, you have Friday, which is a story that I think evokes, it works really well and it fits a lot of different audiences, but it's like a teen detective story set in the 70s. And so some people might not immediately be appealed to it. Do you feel like over these 7 years that you have kind of learned more about what comic readers want or perhaps what they connect to, or do you think it's still kind of a mystery?
I never think about that.
No?
I never do.
No, that's fair.
No. I mean, I do know what they don't like. I know when I talked to Brian the first time about Barrier, we knew that's not what people wanted. But we thought it would be fun and challenging and exciting enough to spend the time doing that. So, and that's basically what I'm worried the most whenever I start a project. Again, it's gonna take me. I know it's gonna take me so long to get it done that one thing that I want is for that to keep me excited while I'm working on it. So, and that's the only thing that I look into. It's the only thing that I'm concerned about. Sometimes you can more or less guess if it's gonna resonate with the readers more or less. With Barrier, it was obvious that it was incredibly, I think, beyond risk, because it was like a certainty that it wouldn't be very popular because it was such a weird proposal. But you never know. Again, I think as creators we shouldn't really think too much about that, because there's no way of knowing really what is it that's going to work at some point with the audience. You just don't know.
Yeah.
So I really don't think about it. I don't. I mean, Friday could be on the one hand, is as you say, it's kind of strange, and I can see lots of people not being attracted to it. But on the other hand, it could be something that it could be commercial too.
Oh, totally. I mean, I had when I wrote about Friday for my Friday column. I had several emails from people being like, "Oh my God, this comic is like perfect for me," because they grew up on the same stuff that Ed writes about in the back, like the Harriet the Spies and all those different things. And I think, I'm not trying to pigeonhole comics as something, but one of the things that really fuels comics in a lot of ways is nostalgia, and having that connection there is. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, honestly, like as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad to see Ed writing something that's, the whole post YA thing, like fitting something that like kind of fits for the young adult is such an interesting niche. And then combining you with it is like, woo, I'm all about it. But I mean,
I was really attracted to that part, to the fact, because I felt like doing something, more adventurous or more. So that was something that was, again, when he told me about it, I was like, sure, this is what I was looking for. Something, something that's very different from what Brian usually writes about.
Right. But I mean, I think it would be the tricky thing, coming over to, I mean, doing any comic really is like the idea that you could just like kind of reverse engineer what readers want and like make that or something. Because, I mean, frankly, you look at the most popular comics from the last 20 years, like, who would have, The Walking Dead wasn't popular at first, but it became extremely popular eventually. And then you look at like Raina Telgemeier's stuff, it's like, she made a comic about teeth effectively and like, having like, braces and stuff like that. And I don't think most people would have expected that to be super popular, or like even something like Watchmen, which has been popular since whenever it came out, 87, 88.
Yeah.
And, what makes that popular? Who knows? But, you never know where the next big idea is going to be, because it's kind of completely unpredictable.
It is. It's probably not going to be in Panel Syndicate, but
I'm going to see what I can do about that. I want to support your crime syndicate as much as possible.
There you go. Because something's sure is that we're all criminals.
Exactly. Well, Marcos, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Friday, Panel Syndicate, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Marcos Martin. You can find him on Twitter at Panel Syndicate and his work in Friday at panelsyndicate.com. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter at SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Greg Peterson, Stephen Hall, Dan Lee, Cameron Schrader, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Mara, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pachalo, Torrin Grunbeck, Buzz Bubbles, Chris Rata, Transmitter Down, Harry Sayer, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Leona Kangas, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Gift, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Vita Yala, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Phil White, Sean Pinnell, Kent Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Assey, Adam Bogart, Xavier Files, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Ira James Udaskin, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Carl McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.